We'd like to call the finance meeting to order. Is there any public comment? Yes.
I want to
Say your
speak.
name, please.
My name is George D. Martin.
Yes.
I want to speak on the Florida. Should I wait till we get
Yeah,
there?
we'll wait till we get there, George. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other public comment or anything not on YouTube? All right. Moving forward, first item is discussion and approval of a $200 gift card donation to CASA. Anita.
Thank you, Commissioners. Yes, we have a dilemma in that we graduated a class of 10 new CASAs, and they got together along with 5 other CASAs and contributed towards this $200 certificate that we weren't expecting. We are asking, I guess, permission, forgiveness, or any advice or guidance that you can offer with that.
You'd be asking for them to accept the donation
That's
for your office's use.
That would be for 3 of us. That's for the CASA office. That's right. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the acceptance of the donation for the CASA office's use.
We would use it for work-related, we do staff meetings or take our CASAs to lunch, and then we would get to treat ourselves. So we would use it, obviously, for anything work-related that we can use it.
Okay. We have a second. Any further questions or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So how many CASAs get together? Is it a mi casa, su casa?
Thanks a lot. We didn't have a decision for that easy. All right, next on our agenda today is the East Pennsboro Omerta. We have several people with us today, so whoever wants to begin.
Sure. Commissioners.
And please introduce yourself.
Yes, sir.
I know we know some of you, but just for the record.
My name is John Owen. I'm the Assistant Township Manager and Chief Planner for East Pennsboro Township. And Derek Quigley is here. He is Community Development Director for East Pennsboro Township as well. We're here today. We received a packet of information. We do not have it. Surely disseminate some more information to you. We're here to ask for your to positively affirm the LRTA for East Pennsboro Township in Cumberland County. Specifically, we're targeting the property, about 50 acres in East Pennsboro Township that's bounded by I-81, 1115 at First Street in the Somerdale area. The property would include, I know former Commissioner George DeMartin is here today, the Longsdorf property and the CIA. So there are any specific questions that I can hopefully field.
Does the board members have any questions?
Well, I have a number of questions. First of all, I just wanted to ask, so this apparently is the outline, and I know not everybody can see it, of the LRTA that you're presenting to us today.
Correct.
And this is the outline of the LRTA that apparently was presented to our County Planning Commission on September 25th or somewhere else, September 25th.
Yes, that shows the Somerdale property in Somerdale minus the IU and the it's the PennDOT property that's on there.
Yeah,
And the Longsdorf house as well.
Yeah, the Longsdorf house was excluded from the proposed LRTA. It was presented to the County Planning Commission on September 25th, but what you're presenting to us now is a LRTA that includes the Longsdorf mill.
Can I clarify? That is an illustration. The one that was presented in county planning was an illustration for the purposes of taxes being received versus taxes that are currently not on the record on the tax rolls. It was never intended to set the boundaries. It's showing a property which is currently not taxed and will be taxed in the future. That's what the table associated with it indicates.
So, in other words, with this LRTA and the LRTA boundaries, essentially the the Longsdorff home, the historic Longsdorff Miller home, would no longer be situated where it is presently. Is that right?
The property where it is currently situated is part of the LERTA. My LERTA boundaries, yes.
Which, okay, well, let me follow up with an additional question. I appreciate everybody's indulgence here. As what I understand is there was an agreement, letter of agreement back in August of 2010, signed by the president of the Board of Township Commissioners at the time, and executed deeds signed by the principals of 200 First Street Associates, and the IDA and the township that transferred ownership of the Longsdorff Miller home to the county with a requirement that the township acquire the house, not a may, the township acquire the house if the county no longer wanted it, in exchange for some additional acreage of land from the Summerdale tract for 200 First Street Associates. Now, I know it was not recorded, but as I understand it, it's an executed deed. And I don't know whether our solicitor has had an opportunity to review that yet, but I believe that it's a valid agreement, unless somebody could tell me what action was taken by the Township Board of Commissioners to negate that agreement, which was approved by the Board of Commissioners previously.
The only record that I know that exists, and I think it kind of mirrors the land development plan for the property, circa the same time frame, relative to the two deeds you're talking about. This is a recorded land development plan for the property where this land swap occurred, lot 4 and lot 5, identified as the name for the record here. Final subdivision consolidation plan for the lands of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 200 First Street, LLC, First Street and Valley Road, Silverdale, PA. Recorded as instrument number in the county courthouse as 2011-08233 on 14 March 2011. That shows the change or the subdivision of those properties, which is Longsdorff property and the 200 First Street Associates property. The deeds, as I understand them, are held by the CCIDA. They're held in escrow, and they do protect the Longsdorff house best essentially. But as far as the action, the only letter that I can reference is there's one in that same time frame of 2010. Commissioner, find it there. There was one from the former board president, Wayne Melnick. Talked about the township having first rights to the property once the property is sold, but it did lay out some requirements of the property.
Yeah, my question, JB, has to do with who, at this point in time, based on those executed deeds and transfer of the land, who really owns the Longsdorff home?
My understanding is the CCIDA possesses those two deeds.
Okay, so the county CCIDA owns the Longsdorff home. And that's why I don't quite understand if there's nothing that's been done by the Township Board of Commissioners or anybody else in authority to change that. Why it's included as part of the LERTA, to get back to the subject that's before us. I wanted to also just submit for the record a letter that was submitted by the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners on August 28, 2014, in support of the IDA's and the township's efforts to secure state financing from the Commonwealth Financing Authority for future development of the Summerdale tract. As part of that letter, we made note of the fact that among various aspects of the project, one of the things was the preservation of the historically significant Longsdorff home, the birthplace in 1884 of Enola Miller, whose first name was chosen to name the Pennsylvania Railroad's flag station at the time, and later adopted as the name of the local post office and the surrounding town. The letter went on to read, "This historic, beautiful farmhouse is being eyed as a potential visitor center at the entrance to the Cumberland Valley and/or for the potential future siting of the local East Pennsboro Historical Society to promote the town's rich railroad and historical heritage to residents and tourists alike." So we have that, and I'll submit that for this record. The other thing I wanted to ask is, my understanding is the East Pennsboro Historical Society came before the East Pennsboro Township Board of Commissioners just recently and presented a letter that asked that the Longsdorff Miller Historical Site be preserved where it is and transferred to the Historical Society for future use. Has the township acted on that request?
My understanding is no on that request, sir. However, the Board of Commissioners are very steadfast in the preservation of the house. And potential of it being moved is one of the options on the table at this point. And they want to preserve the house, whether it's in the current location it is or another portion of the property, that remains to be seen, sir.
Okay. Has there been any projection, estimate relative to the cost of moving that home?
I do not have a cost on that, sir, although their Kentucky, the CCIDA has secured through whatever the builder's name is, Wolf Builders, that are willing to move the house to a portion of the property and ensure that it is moved and put back together if something were unfortunately to happen to the house during the
Have they evaluated the house to ensure that it's feasible to do that?
That I can't speak directly to, but they have an extensive experience in moving houses, and I believe they have a 37 or 38-page PowerPoint presentation that they have made available for everyone. And we can share that with the commissioners of the community. They do specialize in moving historical structures.
As you know, they're all unique depending on the
Yes.
degree of deterioration and such. That's why I was
And
curious. if they
construction
actually-
area, obviously.
Sure. I was just curious if they had actually put eyes on the facility, the building, the property.
My understanding is, yes, they have said that they feel confident that they can.
So you think it's a bona fide?
Yeah, yes, they have sent representatives to a couple of meetings to indicate that yes, they're familiar with the property and that they feel confident that they can do that.
And they were at the last school board meeting where the borough was going to be considered, requested to be there, but no one called upon to make that presentation, so I don't have it.
If you don't mind me interrupting.
Please.
Commissioner Hertzler. Commissioner Hertzler made reference to an agreement or a letter agreement, and I remember seeing those probably about a week or so ago. And there was clearly a commitment by the parties to those documents to preserve that home. And maybe I'm cutting to the chase too quickly here. Has that understanding or that agreement been changed in any way?
No, sir, the preservation of the house, and I'm purely speaking preservation, is a firm commitment by the Board of Commissioners.
Well, that doesn't really answer our solicitor's question. Okay? But, no, because I think the question is, there was a land swap agreement with 201st Street Associates, which is part of the letter of agreement, all right? So the land swap doesn't, yes, it would be preserved where it is. And it would also, under that agreement, if the county didn't want it, under that agreement, it was supposed to be acquired, not may, supposed to be acquired by the township. So that's what's in the agreement. So the question is not whether you're saying we're going to preserve it, because then you're talking about moving it, especially if you're thinking about developing the site where the house currently stands.
If I could suggest, Mr. Giorgione, the representative from the CCIDA, may better be able to answer those questions.
necessarily have copies of all these documents today, but I'll be happy to forward them to your solicitor when I get back to my office, and then you can have them electronically, and we can forward them. The agreement from the beginning in the relationship between the IDA and East Pennsboro Township was always for preservation of the house and preservation of the house at its current location. And that goes to the historical negotiations between not just those public bodies, but the developer, 201st Street Associates, who controls that corner, and in particularly the house and the acres around it. There was a letter agreement referred to by Commissioner Herzler from August 2010 that specifically set forth the process of preservation of the house at its current location. And that set the stage for negotiations with the front property owner about how the property would be preserved, and specifically a swap of land between that developer and the CCIDA in the township. Now, technically, I trust you understand, the IDA is the one that owns the property, is deeded the property, but it's always worked hand in hand with the township. That occurred, the deeds, around March 2011, as I recall. And I do have copies of those deeds. Matter of fact, I probably have the originals with me today. The deeds were never recorded at that time because of an agreement between the township and the IDA that they would be held in escrow, because the moment they were recorded, then it would be the IDA's responsibility to take care of the house, to mow the lawn, and of course the property would be tax exempt. So I guess maybe it was my idea saying, well, why don't we just leave the property in the hands of the developer from a technical perspective, not file the deed, so he can mow the lawn, he can pay the taxes, and we'll just continue down this path, as we were in the middle of seeking developers for the larger tract of 50 acres. Again, in this discussion we're having right now, we're talking about 3 or 4 acres just on that corner and swapping of land. And so in that land swap, the front developer had 2.5 acres. At the time with the house and land, he was swapping the house and 1 acre for 2.1 acres from the IDA. So at the end, the IDA would then have control of the house and the corner, and then he would have essentially a piece of property that was 3.6 acres, but it was essentially right on the corner. So you have the agreement in 2010, you have a lot of this land swap preservation activity in early 2011, and at the same time, we were out with an RFP, the IDA, again in partnership with the township, seeking developers. You'll see from minutes, which I have copies of, from spring of 2011, where Bob Gill was before his board. Of course, he was the executive director at the time, the township manager, telling them that every developer that was looking at the property and making proposals wanted also to control the corner and all of the acres, including the house, for the development. A lot of concerns. They weren't sure at that time where the roadway was going to be able to be built off of 11 to 15 for the access. They were concerned about topography, and so they wanted control of that corner property. And Bob had indicated at that time that the corner property might have to be included in the agreement, but that we would look to a preservation of the home, but probably somewhere on the property or on neighboring property. As a matter of fact, the discussion at that time was the township park was right up the road. Maybe the building could be moved to the township park, maybe somewhere up the street. So as we go through the process, we are now in, I would say, August of 2011, and negotiations are starting to occur with a specific developer around an agreement of sale. And this parcel of property, which again is controlled by the IDA because of the deed swap, is part of the agreement of sale. And there was a paragraph that's put in that agreement of sale that talks about the preservation and relocation of the, what we call the Enola House. And eventually that agreement was signed September 30th of 2011. And in between the drafting of that document and the signing of the document, there was a letter from the IDA saying, we know we had an agreement back in August 2010 to preserve the house at its current location. You know the dilemma we're in with the developers and them wanting to control the house and the corner of the property. We're going to include the property as part of the agreement of sale, but we're agreeing that it has to be preserved and it'll be relocated somewhere on the property. or in a neighboring property.
Could I just ask a question on that? Okay. Was there ever action taken by the Board of Commissioners to, if you will, affirm what you just mentioned?
No, I don't believe that there was. I don't have anything from the township records that shows that they put it on for an affirmative vote. No, but there was a discussion.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm curious about that then. If it started out by the letter agreement and the early agreement, that the idea was to preserve that home on the property, what document has been executed by the township and the IDA that undoes that?
Just the sales agreement with the developer.
The township is not a party to it.
That's correct. But they gave us approval to go forward.
I don't understand how their verbal approval when it deals with an interest in land is enforceable.
Because the township doesn't have an interest in the land. The IDA is the one that owns it.
Well, they're a party to agreement where there's an agreement between both parties that this home is to be on that property and preserved.
The agreement was an agreement as it relates to the house and the land, but it wasn't a land transaction. It was an agreement that they would go forward and agree to jointly preserve the property.
What happened to the right of first refusal then?
They didn't exercise it.
That is an interest in property. How do you do that without a writing?
Why does it have to be a writing?
It's the statute of frauds.
Statute of frauds, man. I don't
An
know
interest in
anything about
writing,
that.
an interest in land must be noted in writing.
I just don't think they had an interest in land. I don't think you're correct.
I'm raising that. Well, attorneys disagree all the time.
They did.
I understand that.
I did.
But now that I think I understand what's happening, I have a question as to whether it can be done the way it's planned to be done. I'm raising the issue. You advise the IDA. I advise this body. But I have a question as to
Well, I have advised my
how that
client,
can be done.
and this agreement's been in place for 8 years, and it's in control of the developer now. The land's controlled by the developer.
I don't think that matters to the concern that I've raised. I mean, I think that makes the problem that I think you have more of a problem. That's my opinion.
Well, and again, the problem's not with my client. It may be with your advice to give to yours, but not with my client. We don't have a problem.
I still don't see how this is not a problem for township. Maybe their solicitor is satisfied with this history that I'm just learning. And that's solicitor's obligation to make those decisions.
Can you ask me a question?
Yeah, I believe she is filed, and I don't believe
She's
made
been
any objection.
involved in this.
Okay, she's not here. I have a question, and it sort of goes to the heart of this, the discussion taking place now, but I just need clarity. So if I'm wrong, even with the fact that I'm your boss, you can tell me I'm wrong. So.
I won't do it publicly.
Well, I'm asking you to go public. Okay, the LERTA, for those who may not be familiar with it, essentially is a formalized policy that allows for a problematic property to forego the collection of taxation on improvements to that property over a set period of time. And there's generally a schedule and it's approved. And at least speaking from our role as the county, my experience, at least in my time here, has been that the 3 taxing bodies that are involved must generally come to agreement, but I don't know that all 3 need to. Is that correct, or is it?
You need to come to an agreement as to whether you will provide a tax exemption through the LERTA.
Okay, but do all parties need to sign on to it, or do all 3 parties need to sign on to
You
it?
need to do your own ordinance to sign on to that concept, yes.
Okay, all right, so we would make that decision, but the LERTA itself is not held hostage by one party.
It is not.
Okay.
For example,
I just need-
East Pennsboro Township can go forward with a LERTA on its own.
Okay, that helps. That's not really my main question though, is so essentially what we're dealing with here. Now, my understanding of this is typically the school board has the largest impact as a taxing body. In this case, the township also, because of the unique circumstances of the transaction, has a significant financial interest as well. The county's financial interest is lost. It's not even that. So what I'm hearing from us, from our friends here in the township, is a request that we accept that willingness to forego the taxes on the improvements of the property, if they are, and if the school board is. And so I'm a little confused as to why we're having this debate over what seems to me to be the township's issue, not the county's issue.
I am raising it only because the commissioners took a position earlier
Yeah.
about the preservation of that home and property. And having given information, or been given information about this history, I'm raising the question as to why that's not still the case, based on the documentation I've been provided.
Do we have any, for lack of a better phrase, do we have any real skin in this game as a legal entity?
If it's the commissioner's decision that they're not concerned any longer with the preservation of that home and property, you have none. Other
Okay,
than
so-
the taxes that you forego by adopting the LRTA ordinance.
Which we aren't really receiving any, is that correct?
I don't know what the
Very
percentage
little.
of property
Yes.
It's very little.
Very little.
45 acres,
Unimproved.
plus or minus unimproved. Originally, there was the Center of Excellence that started construction there. It was the Department of Agriculture's lab in 96, 97, stopped. It's been a blighted property since. Because of that, there's infrastructure that's partially done by the state and was abandoned. But you're dead on, Commissioner.
Okay, so not only we have the least skin in the game on this, but there's not a whole lot of skin to be had.
Correct.
So, okay. I'm personally viewing this as a request from our friends at the township to go along with what they want to do, and frankly, to help them out of a pretty tough spot that developed through circumstance, bad luck, and changes in the marketplace. So I have to say, I'm pretty inclined to let their solicitor and their township figure out whether there's an issue here for the courts or whomever. And I'm inclined to grant the request, but that we're not taking, I don't know, are we taking a vote today or?
I do have that.
Okay.
I'd like to think I have a couple of questions.
But we don't have,
Others as well.
I certainly understand. I'm just raising the issue because of a prior position that you took.
right.
And things change.
Yeah.
I absolutely got it.
And I'm sorry, that letter was when? What year is it?
Mr. Commissioner, what was that?
First one was August 2010. The follow-up letter that we sent was,
In terms of the reference to
August 2011.
preserving, and does it say preserving, is it in place or
Yes, 2010.
the 2010 letter asks that it be preserved?
Correct. 2011, when we sent a letter back saying the developers would like to control the corner, we advocated for preserving it, but with allowing the developers the right to relocate.
Yeah, right. I don't think there was any formal communication on our part then,
No.
one way or the other.
The 2014 communication was a request by us in the township to send a letter on our behalf in support of the grants that we got for the property.
That's right.
As you may know,
We
we submitted
made mention in there about the importance
on preserving the
with
house.
commissioners of the preservation of the house.
You did.
So,
But it didn't say in place, though. I think it just said preservation, as I recall that.
it's a preservation.
Okay.
The question I think that comes down to it, and, look, I'm close to this because I was involved in it initially. I think you might want to hear from 32-member Township Commissioner George DeMorton at this point, because I think, he took the time to be here. And George, what do you have?
I have a couple of questions first of our solicitor.
Okay, I got some additional questions.
Just about 5 minutes ago, you were talking about, I think, a letter or something that was missing at the township regarding preservation. You were saying about an interest in property must be in writing.
Right.
Could you explain that again? I'm sorry.
I'll go back to my early days in law school. There's a statute in Pennsylvania called the statute of frauds, which requires that certain matters be in writing. And one is an agreement concerning an interest in property. And again, I'm just the county solicitor. I'm not the IDA.
Yeah.
I'm not the township. They may have different opinions. But based upon the earlier agreement and the later agreement, it was my understanding, and I think that was confirmed, that that historic home is to be preserved on the property. And my question that was posed was, what documentation? And there's also a right of first refusal. What documentation exists that undoes that? I'm just raising the issue.
Okay, so this, I guess, Jonathan, are you saying, Keith, that there is or isn't or should be some agreement from the township stating that that house needs to be preserved on that property? Is that what is missing?
Yes, because there is a right of first refusal that apparently can no longer be exercised based on what I've heard of this sales agreement with the developer. I'm not sure how that interest can be undone by an agreement by two parties that does not include the township.
So
Maybe I'm all wrong.
wouldn't it be up to the other party to then initiate legal action?
It would be
If
up
they
to
felt they were agreed.
You know, I don't want to, they may have a completely different approach. There are a number of ways to deal with that issue,
Yeah.
but they may have a different approach to it. And they may think I'm all wrong.
I don't want to interrupt Vince's questions, but my perspective simply on this is, I have to ask the question, is this really our problem to solve? And all I'm seeing at this point is a request from the township for us to go along with what they're willing to do themselves. And I fully recognize there was a letter of intent, and the intent most likely was to preserve it in place. 2010 is, we're far removed from there in many ways.
Your 2014 letter.
14.
If you're no longer interested in preserving that property or that home on that property, then everything I'm telling you is irrelevant.
I wouldn't say, well, let me put it this way. I wouldn't say that any of us is not interested. I think at the time that we initiated this, we thought that was a highly desirable condition, but not a condition, that's a poor word. It was not a condition. So it would have been a highly desirable state to pursue. But at the same time, given what has transpired since, I don't know that the county really should be taking an action that is going to saddle the township and its residents with the resulting tax burden that's
I
going to
completely understand. I'm simply raising the issue. I can understand if it's the board's prerogative to do it.
When I first raised it here, in all honesty, the idea was the fact that there was an agreement, a letter of agreement, there's a deed, it's been executed. As far as we've been told here today, nobody has nullified that, right? And the LERTA boundary, right, now includes the house, which would mean that there's going to be development there potentially. We're trying to attract development there. So the question that occurs is whether or not the house is going to be preserved where it is. The issue relative to moving, and this is important because you know what? Our county residents, the comp plan, 82% of the people of Cumberland County that responded to our county's comp plan said that preserving historic sites was important. And we have hundreds of sites in this county that have been identified, right, as being historically significant. So the way I read this at this point is the IDA owns the Longsdorff Miller, right? So I would like the IDA to seek its designation by the County Historical Society as a historical site, a county site. So is that something that the IDA would be willing to consider?
Yes, so the IDA has already sent letters to the county saying that they support preservation of the house and support it being listed on the historic register. We sent that letter in August 2018. But we also indicated that we do expect, because it's under contract with developers, that it would be relocated, but it would be preserved. And Again, all our sales agreement from 2011 forward with every developer, we're on our fourth.
So the
Has
county
had that same
historical,
language carried forward.
so based on that letter, then the county historical society has the ability to designate that as historic.
I don't know what they're gonna do with it, I just know that they asked and we were
Well, I
happy
think it
to
needs to
provide
be
that letter.
clarified that the IDA, owns the property, but
It doesn't, we do own the property, but again, it's under sales agreement, just like the other 45 acres. I mean, they're all under sales agreement with the developer.
but you don't have an executed deed
An executed deed, yes, I have an executed deed.
for the sale of the property.
Oh, an executed deed for the sale, no, an agreement of sale.
That's right.
Right.
Keith, guys, I wasn't here in 2014. This letter from the Board of Commissioners indicates it's to preserve this building. Does it indicate that it's to be preserved on that property, on that same location?
It does not.
It does not. It just says it should be preserved.
Correct.
It does not.
Correct.
All right, thank you for clearing that up. What is the, one more question. John, maybe you can answer this. What is the township commissioner's position on this building? They believe it should be preserved in general, or preserved and remain where it is?
I don't know if an official action has been taken.
Yeah.
I can only speak informally.
Okay.
I believe, as I stated earlier in my introduction here, the township commissioners are all about preservation of this property, preservation of the structure. Whether it moves on the property, it is my feeling that as long as the structure is preserved, it can be relocated on another portion of the property. That is a sense that I have from the board of commissioners, although they have not taken any official action.
Another piece can be moved on that same property somewhere else. I have not heard anyone in this room say that they are against preserving this building. Why can't it stay where it is? Is it just because of infrastructure coming in, or?
There's a couple issues that have been raised through the land development process, and as all of you commissioners know, engineering can solve any solution if they're willing to pay the money, the aggravation, and the time to do so. The corner, from my understanding, is very desirable as part of one of the portions of the real estate where, unfortunately, stormwater management would occur there, whether it be detention pond or significant grading. If you are familiar with the site, if you go up First Street from the Valley Road, if you come off 1115 and head west along Valley Road, there is about a 65 to 70 foot elevation drop by the time you hit Miller Street. So the site would have to be balanced with a lot of grading and earth moving, and that would include stormwater retention. Unfortunately, the street right to the west of that site is called Water Street. It's called Water Street for a very important reason. There used to be a creek there. So hydrology in that area all drains to a port. Now, as I said before, through engineering, and if you want to throw a lot of money at the problem, you can fix it. But is that cost effective for the property? That I can't answer. That is obviously a development question and return on investment in the private sector.
If the house is moved to somewhere on this property, who will pay for that, the developer?
The developer will, sir.
The site that they're looking at right now, that's been identified in the last couple of plans, is the corner right along First Street, right at the other corner, which is adjacent to the driveway for the capital area intermediate unit. And we have a letter from the developer that once it is moved and put back into place and placed on a foundation, then that the house itself and the land will be donated to the East Pennsboro Township Historical Society. So it'll be theirs.
The letter from the developer, I was just curious, could you tell us as to the developer's financial investment in this as of today?
How much he has invested?
Yeah.
I don't have any idea, but it's what he paid for the land and carrying costs for the last 10
You're
years.
talking about the Longsboro farm.
The 2.5 acres that he originally purchased on the corner, right, plus the carrying costs since then. I don't have any idea if I
But I
had to
mean,
guess.
the agreement with the developer to develop the rest of this is, he hasn't invested any money yet on that.
No, that's not true. I mean, there's been some stops and starts on land development that have kind of gone.
How much have we invested, the county and the township? And is it more than the developer?
Oh, it's more than the development.
Yeah, I would have to.
I think. It's in the millions, I think, between both parties. We're in the
I
millions.
have. I have to come back to that, Commissioner Urso. I did
That's
have-
all right.
did have
I
an
know
exhibit.
it's significant, but in terms of when we talk about the developer I made this point when I addressed the County Planning Commission and the Township Board of Commissioners on this, and I've been involved in, like I said, on and off for at least 10 years now, is that the property, in all intents and purposes, owned by the people of East Spencer Township, the taxpayers of East Spencer Township.
All of us, yep.
And the original memorandum of understanding is that this was to be developed in the best interests of the township, meaning the residents of the township. Right? So this, Enola Longsdorf home was one of the key conditions when we entered into this agreement that was going to be preserved. So I'm not going to belabor that. I do want former Commissioner DeMartin to have an opportunity to speak though. And
Well, Commissioner, before you do that, I need to just defend my IDA if you don't mind, because I'd be lax if I didn't. I think that everything that the IDA has done from the beginning of this project has been done with the full support and blessing of the township. I don't think we did anything as a rogue organization. The township's not sitting here today pointing a finger at us. They've understood for quite some time, and we're going back to 2011, that developers wanted to control the corner, and every sales agreement that we've entered into, four of them, including the most recent, which has had multiple amendments, the preservation of the house was paramount, but it also allowed the developers to relocate.
Andrew, have the East Pennsboro Commissioners voted on this alert yet?
They're scheduled to vote on December 20th.
On the 20th.
And to answer, Commissioner, if you're done, Commissioner,
Mhm.
but to answer your question, these are estimated costs that were put together by the Township Manager, John Petropoli. Land purchase, $2.1 million, letter of credit, $174,000, mortgage interest, $651,807, letter of credit interest, $31,066, other expenses by the ICD, or the CCIDA, $446,491, other expenses for EPT, $154,000. Total expenses, $3,608,160. Refunds on deposit, negative $109,370. Total, $3,498,79. Total expenses for the IDA to date, $1,173,790. $1,730,790. A lot of money here. East Pennsboro Township's portion, $586,890 interest paid to date, and this interest only low. There is no principal to be paid on this property. $330,000 and $30,000 other miscellaneous things that are paid for traffic studies, et cetera, some engineering expenses, $154,000. Amount the township owns as part of the agreement to CCIDA as of October 27th, $102,865.
Okay, you rattled off a bunch of numbers there, John. If you wouldn't mind, if you could just send that to us in an email, I'd appreciate it. I just want to, again, give former Commissioner DeMartin an opportunity.
Jim, I'll decide when we got public comment. I still have some questions.
Okay, so do I. Okay.
John, do you know any idea when the school district might be discussing this matter?
Unfortunately, the first time was go before the school district, we had the snow about 3 weeks ago.
Right.
So that was, actually they canceled their meeting, and then it went back to the school district last Thursday, I believe, and at that point there was a motion to table, and Mr. Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, on that pending the township executing the ordinance, which will, again, will be December 20th.
December 20th, very good. Okay, just one more question and we'll open it up for public comment. George, thanks for being patient. Just my opinion, what I'm hearing here is, everybody agrees that this building should be preserved, as do I. If it can be done, relocating it on the same property, and by doing so, would improve everyone's interest in this property. I have no objection to that. I think it's critical, though, to see what the township does December the 20th. But generally speaking, I have no objection to this request. Okay, George.
I just want to speak to this to see what we're talking about.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm here to represent the Historical Society of East Pennsburg. I'm one original member of the Board of Directors for the last 25 years. But I can answer the question since I think I lost my mind with running for school board. I can answer the question of when the school board is going to address it. We did table it to our January 3rd meeting. It has been recommended by our solicitor. He has gone through this before. He is a solicitor of many, the firm is a solicitor of many school districts that do not take action until everybody else takes action. We can see exactly what's going on. That's his recommendation, since we are the big player. But, okay, I just want to get back to, I'm here representing the Historical Society of East Pennsburg. And I would just like to start by saying that we do not have any objections to the learning. We are concerned that the Miller Longsdorff House is within the boundaries. Okay? But we don't have an objection to the learning. We understand, and I personally understand from being a commissioner for 32 years in East Pennsburg Township, that the township is anxious to get out from the burden of this property, and so is the IDA. I think everybody wants to see it developed in the best interest of the community. Okay. And saying that, I did come here today to put on record the importance of the preservation of the Miller Longsdorff House. And I'll tell you the reason why. Okay, you've heard just about everything that's been discussed here. I'm going to make this short and sweet, but there is one, I think, significant comment I'd like to make. And that is, I was signed the original agreement back in 2007. I was president of the board at that time, signed the original agreement. Okay. And I wasn't there for the 2010 agreement. I was aware of everything, and I understand the preservation. I feel that the commissioners in East Pennsburg are committed to the preservation. The Historic Society got heavily involved again. We were heavily involved in the beginning to preserve this house. We got heavily involved again in May of this year because in 2016, the owner, so-called, we thought that the IDA owned it, but 200 First Street Associates were still claiming they owned it, and they basically said the house could not be moved and it would have to be torn down, and they would give the Historic Society of Power Rocks for a monument. So basically, in May of this year, we said, time out a minute, let's get back involved in this. So we got back involved to preserve the house. Okay. And I think we've gotten enough interest from the commissioners that they're committed to preserve the house. But I would just like to put this on the record. The house has been recognized as historic by Cumberland County Comprehensive Plan, the Cumberland County Commissioners. The Cumberland County Historic Society, they went and added it to the register. It has been approved to be put on the historic register. They sent a letter because the property, the deed was never recorded. It's still showing up as 200 First Street Associates as the owner. They sent a letter to the owner, okay, who they assumed was the owner, and the owner would not, this would not sign off on registering this property. The IDA did send a letter to the Historic Society of Cumberland County, but not as the owner. So it cannot be registered because, as far as the Historic Society understands, they're looking at the recorded owner, which is 200 First Street Associates. If the IDA would change that, and make sure that the Historic Society of Cumberland County is aware the IDA owns it, they would register it as a historic site. It has been approved by them to register. So, taking that in, these are all information in writing. The Capital Area Intermediate Unit also recognizes it as a historic site. East Pennsburg School District passed a resolution this year recognizing that as a historic site and supported the preservation and the work of the Historic Society. Of course, the Historical Society of East Pennsburg has, and I know that, let's say, maybe not formally at a commissioners meeting on the record, but I was talked to all the commissioners individually. I do believe that they are committed to preserving the property. But because of what has happened since 2010 and now, I think there has to be some type of, it's been all over the place, to be honest with you. It went to being part of the IDA, the property staying there, separated an acre, to they're going to tear it down in 2016. So you can understand our concerns. Something needs to be firmed up, okay? So we make sure that this house is going to be preserved. But going back, we do not have any objections to the work. We are concerned about it, a little bit of the boundary.
Well, I'm sure most of you know about Silver Spring Township, the Bell Tavern.
Oh, yeah.
Just,
Yeah, we got the.
that was a crime.
Just recently, we were in contact on a regular basis with like the expert of preservation of these properties. And there's been one that has been moved actually by Wolf, this company that the IDA came up with to move this one. And it was $500,000 to move this house in Carlisle, or right outside of Carlisle, an old stone farmhouse. The building you're talking about from the guy that we work with, he said that's a $900,000 deal right there to rebuild that.
Yeah, well, unlike the Bell Tavern, this situation, I'm not hearing anybody who's against preserving that house. So that's a good thing. And there's another house in Silver Spring. It was scheduled to be moved several years ago. It never happened, but the price to move that was like $75,000. And it was about the same size. I know very little about construction, but I can't imagine it would cost that much. But if the developer's willing to pay for it,
Yeah, well, the thing about this house is, this house is 108 years old. It basically has a stacked stone foundation or basement, and it has 2-foot thick stone walls with no skeleton, no frame interstructure. There's stone walls with the rafters and the floor joists going into the stone. And then the house was added onto somewhere in the last 100 years in the back part of it. Okay, so there's a lot of work to be done there. We didn't see any numbers. We don't know what the numbers are. But I can tell you as to when we moved the house, the people that we spoke to said the house should be x-rayed, okay, before it's moved. And then after it's moved, it should be x-rayed again to see if there are any damages or anything that happened along the way. So there's a lot, anything can be moved, the way I understand it, but there's a lot goes into it. And personally, not on the record, I'm just going to make one comment. I can't understand spending I don't know what the number is. Let's say it's $250,000 to be able to use that area as a stormwater drainage pond. That confuses me. And I didn't want to get into the weeds today. I just really want to get on the record with everybody who has recognized this as a historic building and it should be preserved. That's what I want to do. That's it.
I want to thank George, but I also see our former township manager, Bob Gill, back there, and of course, Bob knows how I felt about this from the very beginning. I never thought it was feasible financially or structurally, to move this historic building. Right? So, if you go about moving this thing, you heard estimates here, 500,000, 900,000, who knows what it's going to be, you're going to rebuild it. I think, it just doesn't make any sense to try to move this historic structure from the place where it stood for 177 years. I want to talk briefly, a couple comments on Alert itself. I know that, this is really what this meeting's about, but, so, as I understand it, the entire Somerdale tract, which is zoned Commercial Park Limited, that there is a second text amendment that's pending before the County Planning Commission, coming up on a meeting on December 20th, I believe, when the County Planning Commission will take a look at that and issue its recommendations. The first time this was proposed, it was turned down by the County Planning Commission. And again, it's text amendment, 17-page text amendment, right? And I understand that the township is trying, and that IDA is trying to cast a wide net here. But we know the conditions that were established early on, and that was, we didn't want to see warehousing go in here. So now, I guess part of this is now going to permit storage units. I have no idea what kind of storage units we're talking about. But in any event, the text amendment is at the County Planning Commission. As far as I know, this change to the zoning of East Pennsboro Township, where this property sits, has never been shared yet for to give the public an opportunity to comment on it. I assume that, once this is finalized, the recommendations made by the county, that there'll be a meeting of the Township Planning Commission, and there'll be eventually a required hearing on the text amendment or the change to the zoning, all right? And I'm not sure when all that's going to get done. But to me, and I understand, I appreciate the financial issues here and the effort to move forward, I don't understand how you can enact a tax break for the future and when you really don't know what's going to be developed there yet because it hasn't been established by the zoning. So I would just request that, I know the township's going to meet on December 20th also apparently to adopt their LERTA ordinance. I would suggest that we don't move forward on consideration of a LERTA ordinance here until the text amendment and the zoning has been finalized, so we know exactly what kind of tax, we're giving a tax break, what kind of an property. The other thing I want to mention here, I'm just going to throw this out, and I realize that this is coming at the IDA poll, but the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania held its recent conference, and I'm a member of the Assessment and Taxation Committee. And without regard to this issue or this property, the subject of LERTA came up. And what a number of counties are discovering around the state is that whoever goes in there and develops gets the tax benefit. When the LERTA is over, they turn right around and seek an appeal of their property assessment. And or, in a lot of cases, they pull out and they leave the place is vacant now, and good luck getting any taxes from anybody. I preliminarily talked with our solicitor about this, but I think there's an opportunity here to have a covenant that the county owns the property to essentially prohibit the owners of the property, once it's been developed, from seeking an appeal of their assessment for at least a 5-year period.
Okay, I'll take a look at that issue.
Yeah.
And do it in the sales agreement, is your point?
Excuse me?
Do it in the sales agreement?
Actually, yeah, I think we could do it as a covenant.
Right.
As a recorded document, it runs with the land.
So it's part of the deed, you mean? Or
Part of the
separate?
deed or separate, either way.
And
So there'll be no tax appeal for 5 years after the expiration of the LERTA?
yeah, and of course, if there was an intervening countywide property reassessment, that would not apply. But I've asked our solicitor whether something like that could be done. And since you are the owner of the property, the IDA, I think you would have the ability to. Is that correct, Pete?
I believe so. I also believe that the party under the sales agreement as an equitable owner would probably need to agree to that at this point.
Who's that?
Who do you have under contract to buy the property? You have anybody?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh.
Would probably need to agree to a covenant like that.
Yeah, that's what I said,
Placed on the
agreement is
property.
set. Yeah.
But I think this would be good, not just for the county, but I would also suggest it for the township and the school district as well. So that, once folks have reaped as much as $5 million in tax breaks, whatever it might be, that they don't just essentially run to the County Board of Assessment Appeals and seek a reduction in their assessment.
Okay, I'll look at the issue. I don't know off the top of my head whether something like that's illegal. It doesn't seem like it seems like something you can do. Of course,
Would that be an impediment to the marketing of the property?
I don't know, I mean, it's under sales agreement, so we'd have to talk to the existing owners and they'd have to agree to it as a condition of the LRTA.
I mean, the one thing I would note here is, I would be sympathetic if they were concerned that the county or other taxing bodies would turn around and now try to
Reassess.
recoup everything through reassessment. So if it's, Commissioner Herzog mentioned about having that built in, that all this would be, for naught if there was a county reassessment. If there was a concerted effort to essentially negate the effect of it, then that's dirty pool. And I think,
Yeah, kind of the tricky part is, so the way the LRTA works is, the property is taxable, whatever, as soon as it's sold at the current assessed rate. What happens is when you start building, you pull building permits, and then you check a box that you want the LRTA to apply. And then when the project's complete, they reassess. And then what happens is, you then start paying incrementally 10% every year, up to 10 years, to get to that new assessed value, right?
well, is that the schedule? I mean, the schedule can be whatever we want it to be, but is that the one that's being promoted by the
Yes,
county?
it's a 10 to 10 schedule, and with a 15-year cap on it.
Sunset.
With a sunset. So let's say they pulled a building permit in year 8 on a portion of the property, you're only gonna get 7 years,
Okay.
okay? And so what Commissioner Herzog is saying is you get past that 10-year, then you turn around and appeal, And I'm sure their pushback's gonna be, if you bring a countywide reassessment at some point in that 5-year period, we should have a right to appeal that or challenge it if you try to reassess again. I don't know, that carve out necessarily gives you heartburn, but, I'm sure they're gonna say, okay, well, you're not gonna do a reassessment for 5 years.
All I'm saying is that again, I wanted to relay what apparently is playing out in a number of other jurisdictions around the state with respect to these, tax incentive programs.
Where I see it, I mean, I know what you're talking about. Where I've seen it historically is with KOZs. So you'll have a business that'll move into a KOZ, have a tax-free zone for 10 years, and then when that's up, they're looking for the next KOZ.
That's
Then you got an empty building. The LRTA's a little bit different, particularly in the residential pieces too. I mean, people aren't gonna just leave apartments, and you're not gonna kick people out. But, let me talk to the developers about that, let me look at the legality of it. I don't think it's unreasonable what you request.
Yeah, well,
I'm not a developer, though, so.
I'd like our solicitor to look at it too. But the other thing, and I appreciate, Andy, all the information you provided and the ideas, but the other thing I wanted to just ask, because I was looking over the materials, and this is the last question, Vince, I promise. For the information that was provided by Kadick, I think Mayor Tuna, who helped put together this LRTA proposal, I think, for the township. Procedures required by municipalities on the utilization of LRTAs. There was a notation that as the LRTA legislation is written, this is for business properties and the area should be used as such. Okay. So my question has to do, and I don't object to the inclusion of housing, okay, but how does housing fall under the category of the LRTA?
Commercial, residential has been permitted as long as it's stated within the LRTA ordinance. So, in other words, hotels, things that are hotels and apartment buildings which are qualified as residential, but commercial residential.
Okay. So
But single-family homes, things like that, would not be eligible.
Okay, but townhomes would be.
That is an area that I have not seen. I have not seen anything that supports townhomes. I've seen apartment buildings and hotels, motels, the like have generally been accepted as commercial, residential, and appropriate. And if I may, I just wanted to make sure that you knew, on the township's website is the CPL zoning text amendment and the legal notice of the advertisement for the public hearing, which will be on the 20th of December. That was published in the Patriot News.
On the LRTA?
No, this is the CPO. You had indicated that that it wasn't necessarily, hadn't been seen, and I just want to make sure, for the record, that it is available on the township's website on the homepage.
All right, but you're still waiting for recommendations back from the planning commission.
We went to the planning commission last month, and they wanted certain things tweaked and had some questions.
But that's-
we can have to
They
address those
haven't
issues.
acted, the planning commission's gonna act on that on the 20th, right?
Correct.
So you've already set up a public hearing then on the text amendment?
Yes, also for this one, sir.
Oh, it's everything's on the
Yes,
20th?
and-
What's the rush? That's what I don't understand.
Well, the critical piece in all of this is really the economics. And so with the current agreement that we have with the developer, we have certain deliverables for them to go forward with the development of the property, particularly the design, engineering, and development work. And that is getting the learner approved, getting the text amendment complete, and we have to get the grants extended, all of which are in process. And our goal has been to get that done in 2018, because once it's complete and we provide notice to the developer, within 15 days, they have to start making the monthly debt payments on the property and cover our debt.
They're currently being made by the township?
Township and the IDA, and right now the township, the IDA is sort of out of funds, and so the township has stepped up to do it. So that nuts about $8,500 a month. So now the developer's got to carry its own carrying costs and now carry the township and the IDA. So time is critical. I mean, it's economic.
Well, just so I'm clear on this, the text amendment really has no legal bearing on the learner. They're not.
None.
They're not.
None, and vice versa,
Okay.
and vice versa.
The comment on that as well was recommended for disapproval by our planning commission. But from what I understand, it's because there were so many comments that still need to be addressed. But it was consistent with the county comp plan and the municipal comp plan. Kirk, is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, looking at this, what was presented, I think the intent was there, was consistent with our comp plan, consistent with the municipal comp plan. It was just the mechanics of how it was being presented that the commission had some issues with. And we did receive a point-by-point response from the township, which will be considered next week.
So 5 days before Christmas, you're gonna do the hearing on this 17-page text amendment, and you're also gonna have a vote on the learner ordinance at the township.
Correct.
That's correct, sir.
Mr. Bennett, anyone in the audience has any questions or comments on this matter?
I just have one question as a school board member. You mentioned that once this is, go over that again, if you would, as far as when they start making payments.
Once we have the text amendment approved, which has to be done by the township, which we hope will be the 20th. Once the letter is approved, which the township would go forward on the 20th, we still need the school district and county to participate as soon as possible. And then once we get confirmation in writing from the state that they'll agree to extend the grants again, we will put them on notice, and they have 15 days to start making monthly payments of $8,500 to
What was
carry.
the original expiration of those grants?
Well, we got the grant awards in 2014.
Yeah.
And they have 5-year lives. So our next expiration date, and purportedly our last, is June 30th, 2019. So we got to work a little bit of magic here. We are going to ask for another year, which would be a 6th year, to go to June 30th of 2020. And we're going to do it on the premise, we hope, that land development's in queue, and that ground will be broken in 2019. So it'll be
Can you
complete.
provide them with enough proof that, hey, yeah, it's really going to happen?
I know,
You think they'd be-
and trust me, we've had some fits and starts, so this is not gonna be easy meetings, and it worries us as a risk. Because, again, if the grants are denied, it doesn't mean everything comes grinding to a halt, it just means the economics go upside down. And they're already
Those grants are
damn
pretty
near
big
upside
chunk.
down. Yeah, they're
that's pretty
critical.
big chunk.
It's $3 million, and you're talking about roadway improvements in that area of close to $4.5 million. So,
So there is some urgency.
they're critical. We may need another letter from them.
Yeah, that's no problem.
And Gary, they're very critical. Robert Gill, retired township. The grants were very critical, and the backbone too, Andy. But the grants, we were very fortunate. We were the second largest grant in the state of Pennsylvania, getting $3 million worth of grants. And I hate to say that, we had kind of said we were a shovel-ready project. Well, we weren't shovel-ready evidently, because here we are, 4 years later, still worrying about this project and trying to get these grants extended. And it is the utmost important to get these grants extended, because $3 million is very important for that project.
I did notice the relief in your voice when you said retired township. I think you're under as much stress now as you were then, anyhow, so.
Tried to get out of this project, but the board won't let me. I was a part of this, and Jim was, and George was. We want to see this complete. We want to see this developed in the proper manner. I don't disagree. Jim brought up some very good points here today, and so did George. But we served together for 30 years, us three. And sometimes I wonder how all three of us survived with each other, but we did. But this is important to East Pennsboro. It really is. And I think the commissioners have asked some good questions, but this is a LERTA program, and I think it's in the best interest that the county and the school district and township move forward so that we can see this project develop.
The intent of the LERTA is to assist in the development of properties that have been deemed problematic.
Thank you.
I think this qualifies as problematic.
Thank you. And we will benefit tremendously through the taxes and also through building permits, sewer fees, everything, refuse fees, etc.
Okay, we have other issues, guys. I'm going to make a suggestion here to my colleagues that we hold off on any action until after East Pennsboro takes actions, but we, the county, will take actions shortly after that. Is that acceptable?
That's fine, and I also would just like to ask that in the interim, take a look at the possibility of that covenant.
Oh, yeah. Commissioner, your next meeting's early January, I assume?
January 2nd.
I honestly don't know.
We have one more.
Yeah, you have
17th.
17th.
And maybe that's before the
Oh, yeah,
20th,
yeah.
so you're in
Before the 20th, so
January.
that's- we'll be done in
14 days.
Second.
And if I may, I did misspeak earlier, also the LERTA proposed ordinance is also on the website. With that, with the legal advertisement for that as well.
Okay.
So they're both there.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
That's good to know.
I think the next workshop is the 28th.
Wait, it's canceled? Okay. CFO says it's canceled, so therefore it's canceled.
27th. Yeah, it's not longer. All right, I guess it'll be in January, early January.
Yeah, minutes for this meeting will be on the website, and then I get a copy of them when they're available, or
They'll be available on the website.
Teresa behind you's taking them.
okay.
It'll be sometime next week, probably till I get to them, yeah, but
That's okay.
we'll work on it, and it'll be next week.
You didn't doze off in between there.
This has a big file.
Thank you.
George, the other day, we're being streamed across the world. So,
Oh, are we?
we're being streamed across the world right now.
Can't-
Get on the first part of the agenda next time.
Is that pretty easy to do?
Hey, Cumberland Beach, January 31st, I'll be there.
We'll talk about that at our school board meetings to do.
It's serious.
You doing it in-house? So it's not that,
Play golf.
so it's pretty easy to do. Our technical guy,
That's all right. Here you go.
maybe I'll bring it up at school board meeting. What's your name?
Just hasn't been a hold of IMTL here.
I just see it, Mark
I'll get
Adams.
it to Jim.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make it such that we need to be able to do it, because we really have crappy minutes, and I'd like to see it on some video. You know, I'm used to the township, we have a stenographer. The school districts, they use, office programs, or whatever, and the minutes are.
Right.
These patient like people want to.
I had to go online and do my parking. Yeah, you sent me that online. Yeah, I kept hoping the job was just get my question.
I don't think so. Thanks.
We've done enough.
Apparently.
We don't want to wear it out.
I should have put you folks first on the agenda, so my apologies for the lateness of the hour. we'll talk about the 2019 funding request. Carolyn,
Thank you.
thank you for being patient.
Sure. And I brought some colleagues, I think directors
That's
from,
fine, yeah.
yeah, directors from Frederickson, Bosler, and Amelia Gibbons, so some differently sized libraries represented, but certainly have a lot of interest in this project. So we are seeking a $100,000 conditional grant opportunity for 2019. You should have a 2-page handout from that that explains it. So we're seeking this grant opportunity for a project that we'll do in 2019, and the funding would come then in 2020. That's part of the memorandum of understanding we signed in December of 2016.
I do not. Can I get
You
it?
don't have. I knew you were waiting. There we go, we've got some extra copies there.
I got too many other things in this folder. Thank you very much, I'm sorry.
So in discussion with Sandy Moyle and Dana, and by discussion, really it was emails going back and forth with Dana Betts and Sandy Moyle and I, we all agreed that a single project, a fairly expensive project, would be a good launch point for the 2019 project. But we've split it into 5 different parts based on ability to accomplish it within the year. I really don't think that radio frequency identification can be fully accomplished in 1 year, but I think we can get far enough that we can evaluate it and know the results of the project. I don't know that we get through our whole collections in 1 year, but in 2017 we had over 2 million items borrowed. And self-checkouts are something that we had and we're replacing them this year. We're adding to those credit card payment, but we still have, we have a lot of staff involvement in the circulation process and inventory fix. We conceived of this project back in probably 2008, maybe even earlier. We've been looking at it for a long time, and it did make it into the 2012 long-range plan, which we're still using through 2019, the same strategic plan. So it's been part of that to do an RFID project to increase the capacity to handle the growing demands of our collection effectively and to use our staff expertise effectively as well. So we feel like RFID would help with the long waits on checking in materials as well as the checkout system that I've discussed before. We currently have core systems for inventory. It's a tedious process, and this would help with that. The speed of RFID generally is about, they could do like 40 items or more a second, where when we're checking out with barcodes, it takes about a half a second for the barcode reader to respond to every one of those. So that's just one example of the speed at check-in and check-out. It's a very reliable system with high accuracy in comparison to barcodes. Barcodes, again, have human interaction, so there's a lot of room for mistakes. So the automation of that needs to be fewer human errors. And the barcodes can be read, the barcodes are read within inches, where RFID tags can be read within feet. So it doesn't need to be immediately in the vicinity for security purposes in terms of gates. It also, we anticipate, would help with the perhaps injury prevention, the repetitive motion of scanning barcodes, especially someone at a check-in desk might experience. The cost has gone down considerably. When we started looking at it in 2008, we were looking at costs at $500,000 and above. The industry standards that have come about in 2011 with compatibility of systems so that you can buy from different vendors rather than things being proprietary with one vendor. We believe that this probably could be done for under $200,000. We haven't fully investigated the costs. That's actually part of the proposal, is to pull this off in 5 phases. The first of which is system design, where we would create a process map. We would look at the reports that we need from a system. We would educate ourselves about the whole process of tag standards, reliability, speed conversion. Not that no one has educated themselves, but we make sure a wider group of staff are aware of how the technology works, so that we can design an RFID system that we can go to our funders, ask for funding on that, as well as functional requirements for writing an RFP. So we specifically know what needs to be improved and what we can anticipate the costs should be. And then the second phase would be the acquisition of funding. So determining the costs of a system, and then looking for grant funding opportunities that might be able to cover all or part of the costs of that. Going to our board and having our board allocate technology funds, make a transfer to our operational budget so that we can pay for the system. And additionally, if there are parts that we figure out that we cannot cover as a library system, then going to the member libraries and asking whether or not they might want to purchase any parts. We wouldn't put any burden on libraries to purchase anything that's crucial to the system. But for instance, if they wanted security gates, currently none of the libraries are using security gates. That would be something that perhaps might fall into their budget, so they could decide if they want to plan for those expenditures. If we can cover them, we will. The third step would be to select a vendor, and that would involve I'm assuming it would involve an RFP process, that we would document all the costs, we document all the things that we want out of the system so that we can get detailed product information such as cost, warranties, certifications, commitments, endorsements, making sure that it would work with our current ILS vendor. So we compare the responses from vendors and have our board approve for a vendor. The fourth step will be conversion of the collection, and this is the largest part of an RFID system, would be integrating it into our current practices. So for the libraries, that would be making sure that they have the right placement of any systems such as gates, any power sources or self-service equipment, that they're all in the right places to run an RFID system. Secondly, we would, the member libraries and the library system staff would work together with a project manager, I'm assuming would be assigned by the vendor or our own project manager, to create a detailed implementation plan so that we could set targets for the number of items that can be tagged in the time period we have, so that we can make sure we allocate the right resources, and by that I really mean human resources, to the project of tagging the materials and getting them readable by the system. And then making sure that we integrate tagging into the future of our collection. So how do we work with our book jobbers to get them to do it in advance? Is it something that we purchase and add ourselves? But making sure that we integrate that fully into the collection management process. And the fifth section of this, or the fifth step, which could be done during the conversion process, would be to train. I shouldn't say could, it would be done simultaneously, would be to train and then evaluate. So we would want to make sure that member library directors are facilitating change management with their staff, so that their staff understand what this means in terms of staffing assignments, because it certainly will change the way we work with our personnel. The library system staff would develop the training materials for staff and also public information campaign. And then we would evaluate the processes associated with the RFID system to make sure that it's operating at optimal efficiency. And finally, provide a report to the commissioners on how the project has been going, or, like I said, I assume it will not be completed in 2019, but where we are and how we feel it's working. So,
I have a couple of things. I did not have a chance to look at this.
Okay.
I'm hearing this for the first time, reading it simultaneously.
okay.
So, a number of things that jump out at me. So, basically, you're going to spend $100,000 before you even begin to pay a vendor.
No. Okay, so, we're asking for the conditional grant to do this project in 2019. So the money from that conditional grant is granted to us per the memorandum of understanding in 2020. So we are going to start this process with the investigation, no money spent yet.
Okay.
Start working with a vendor after we've done the RFP process and chosen a vendor, and they'll give us a cost. We've looked into this, like I said, since 2008, we've been studying this and watching the cost drop. So we have an idea of what it did cost, what it is going to cost. Just one example, when we first started looking at it, the tags that go in the books, the RFID tags themselves, were $1.25 a piece. The latest quote that we received, they're 11 cents a piece. So, you know, we've been watching that cost drop, and we think it's affordable now. So we'll find a vendor. I'm estimating that the cost could be about $200,000. I really won't know until I get real quotes. But then that's when we'll start paying a vendor, when we actually employ them to help us through this process.
And how much of this will you have to expend just to get to that point?
Other than general personnel costs, I mean, there wouldn't be any,
No.
no out-of-pocket costs.
Okay, so the system design.
Right, the system design will be our IT staff looking at, working with the member libraries and looking at what do we need to add to our self-checkout stations.
Right.
I don't know the answer to this,
It-
pads, reader pads.
So that is not, that's not something the vendor would do?
They would advise, we could work with vendors to advise us on this. They're certainly going to be the experts.
Okay.
And they're going to give us the final, for instance, we have about 20 checkout machines, well, 20 self-checkout machines for sure. So they'll say to us, well, you need 20 pads. You need this many software licenses. I don't know how many, if they need one software license for the whole system or.
So you will have a vendor engaged up front.
We've been in talks with 3 different vendors so far, just over the years, finding out what's the latest in this technology.
All right, and the chief benefit you see of this is faster checkout, faster check-in, and that subsequently will create more availability for existing staff to do other things.
Sure, I mean, it's reallocation of staff duties. That's a big piece of it, because of that speed and self-sufficiency. If we would get RFID on our book drops, and again, it's an if, but if we decide to implement that, people would be able to just put their things in the book drop and they'd be checked in. So it wouldn't take staff time. So obviously they could be redeployed to face-to-face services, doing library programming, helping customers who need the help. So increased speed of circulation, simplified shelf management. As I said, we really don't have an efficient way to take care of inventory. With the whole collection tag, you can walk down the shelves with a wand and it tells you if there's anything missing that isn't currently checked out or already marked as missing, but it should be there on the shelf. I mean, that's just one example. It can tell you if something is on hold that was there on the shelf. So shelf reading for inventory would be great. Finding lost items, what we've heard from other libraries who use this, is just that, again, that system of wands, being able to, you're using it at Bosler Library, and it hits on a Amelia Given item that has been listed as lost for years or whatever, So it'll find thousands of dollars in lost items. I mentioned the reduction in staff injuries. There's been very little study on this, but some study, and the dean of the library at Sonoma State University went on record as saying that barcode scanners are a major cause in her library of repetitive work injuries, so motion injuries. The reliability of it, the fact that it has near 100% detection rates, would be great security for our libraries, for our collection. There's just that human error that sometimes people forget and
Sure.
walk out with things.
All right, I'll take a closer look at it, so I don't have a lot of questions to you, but I did want to ask Al. It's been a while since I've seen what the conditional grant programming was from last year, but I'd be very concerned that if we're spending everything on one program, are we losing any continuity with anything else that has been considered a priority a year ago?
I don't feel like we are. I think, we had 8 projects 2 years in a row. We had 8 projects, some of them quite major, some of them not nearly as intensive. But we really felt that this project would be so impactful, along with the library system moving, that we didn't really want to try and take on a series of 8 projects to manage. That this is a huge project in and of itself, and a lot of reliance on managing the 8 facilities to make sure this all happens in a timely manner.
I may have more questions, because I'm going to go back and look at the other things. It just seems to me that some of those were pursued with the idea that they would create their own byproducts to be pursued. And I just want to make sure we're not losing important momentum on certain things. And I'll repeat what I've said in the past when we've had the discussions. It seems to me that the challenge before the libraries is to find ways to make yourselves increasingly relevant to a larger number of people, because it does seem like the range of folks has become narrower over the years, and to sustain the type of public support you need for long-term viability, need to be relevant. So we're just hoping we wouldn't lose any momentum on anything that we started before.
Yeah, and I don't think we would.
Funding sources was one.
Right.
The Library of the Futures initiative.
And we still have staff goals for those sorts of things. For instance, this year, one of the conditional grant items was a fundraising. There was a fundraising goal in there, and it's actually at this point more than double what we set in the goal. With a person in place to do fundraising and grant management with our libraries, it's been amazing. And that's just taking off with great momentum. The work with, the work with the streaming, the downloadable content has been fantastic. Programming at libraries, including going back to the intergenerational programming, the cultural programming, is bringing more and more people in our doors every day. This is the sort of project that it does attract people. If you can think back to the days when we used to stamp library cards and we moved to an automated catalog system, suddenly that was a boost to people using the library because they were attracted to that technology. It's the same way with RFID. It becomes a destination library. People want to check out this new technology, they want to use this new technology. So it really, I think it'll bring people in the doors to see it, to experience it. And when they have a better experience, when they're not waiting in a long line to use our libraries, they're more apt to say, yeah, I'll stop in. I can quickly run in, get my hold, put it on that pad, it's checked out, I'm back out the door. So, I think it will be right in line with all of those things.
Karen,
And I don't think we lose sight of the others.
have you reached all the 2018 goals?
I believe we go by December 31st. We had a real slowdown with one of them, and that was the self-checkout project. We actually waited 5 months on some licensing issues and a change of our contract, things that put us way behind on that project, but that's the only one that causes concern for me. And they are, well, you were there for that meeting with Jeff on the parole, books for parolees. Those computers are all lined up and just ready to go as soon as the final software comes through. So, yeah, I have no doubt that all those goals will be met.
No, I don't think so. I understand with the move and everything that this is probably more doable than a bunch of other things. But I was happy to see that all the libraries support this as, you know, a step forward. And I wanted to ask, you mentioned a couple other counties are doing this. And how many have moved into this latest technological innovation?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has accurate numbers on that. I know Hershey Public Library embarked on an RFID project. They have it implemented. They only have a small portion of it. They only do check out and check in. They don't have security gates or inventory. And I've talked to them about that, and they've said that was a mistake. In Franklin County, they have it at the new oil-free library in Chambersburg, but not at their other libraries. And again, when I talked to them about that, they said it's highly detrimental to the process because now they have people returning books, some that are tagged, some that aren't, and it's not more work for them, but it's a
better to
different
do a system or countywide.
It is, absolutely. It's something you want to roll out countywide. So those are two of our neighbors. There aren't a lot of libraries in Pennsylvania that have moved to this.
So I was looking at the last two sentences here, maybe you can explain out. I know you have this broken down in individual $20,000 grants to get the 100 but the last two sentences. The library system will transfer technology funds to cover operational costs associated with the project. Conditional grant income will contribute to replenishing the library system's technology fund in 2020. So you essentially are moving forward, you're taking the money out of your technology fund.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you get the $100,000 from us the year after next, that'll go into the technology fund. Is that what we're doing here?
Maybe not all of it. I mean, we have to determine, because of the libraries, the individual member libraries participating in this as well, we would want some of that money to go to them as well. So in 2020, when we do our budget, we take that $100,000 and allocate some of it back to the libraries and some of it back into the technology fund. It certainly isn't going to pay for the entire project, but it would go a long way to provide.
You're saying that anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, right?
I'm hoping that we'll see this project come in under 200,000.
Oh, okay.
And again,
It says 200 to 500.
Yeah, the 500,000, that's what it was costing years ago. And like I said, we've been watching that cost.
So the
come down.
county's grant would cover about half of the costs.
That's what I'm thinking, about half of it.
Dana, any comments?
Yeah, we've been talking about going to this one project since the beginning of last year. And Sandy and I both fully supported doing that because of the broad range that it's gonna cover and the amount of staff time that it's gonna take to complete it well. We did ask her to go back, instead of doing it as one project, to split it out into pieces, so that if they hit a roadblock and it takes longer, they don't lose the full grant, or that we can extend a piece of it. And she did do that, and I think they did that very well. So I think this is a project that's worth it.
Other ladies and gentlemen in the back, any comments?
I was just saying to Dana, when you see it operational, I wish we had one of the machines here. It is like magic. You put 7 books under a light and it's instantaneously checked out to you.
Wow.
In addition, if you're carrying your library card and you forget to check books out, it's checked out to you as you leave the library.
If you're
So,
carrying it on your person.
well, yeah. if
There are some libraries that have been able
Yeah.
to structure it that way. Real quickly, I'll just add on. Carolyn mentioned that there aren't a lot of libraries in Pennsylvania that have necessarily done this. Frankly, it's because of expense. If you look at the major libraries across the country, the New York Publics, the Minneapolis, the Seattles, this is not new technology to them. They've had it for a decade, some of them longer than that.
Okay.
In fact, in Minneapolis, one of the whole floors is all conveyor belts because the books are actually checked in and sorted onto carts by where they go in the library. Now, we're not that sophisticated, but Gary, I wanted to mention, to speak to some of the momentum forward you talked about, the meeting we just recently had about probation and parole.
Mhm.
It's a fairly straightforward, simple partnership we could have, but we could do more of them if one of my public service assistant staff could spend 5 minutes checking in what currently takes them an hour and a half. Because instead I could say, we can have that person run these to this location, or we could have a visit to that. So while Carolyn's absolutely right that so much of it is an infrastructural piece, it also would allow us to expand upon some of those other initiatives that we've started to do.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Staff efficiencies.
Mhm, exactly.
And loss prevention, which will be huge.
Good. Sounds good to me.
So Anthony,
That's the one question, not related to this. Is our library system a participant in Canopy? The classic
Interesting, you
films?
should ask that. I will send you some information today.
Okay, that would be great.
We're that close to being. yes.
Okay, as a classic film fan, I know that that's something that a lot of folks.
After this meeting, I will forward you an email.
Okay, thank you.
I can send it to everyone if you're.
They won't appreciate it. It's too background for these guys. Too background. Okay, send it out to everybody. It's very interesting.
He wants to keep it to himself. He's selfish.
I'll send it to you in a separate email.
anything else, Carol?
I believe that's all I have.
Thanks for waiting.
We can talk about that, it's my.
Sorry about that.
We didn't anticipate.
Well, you didn't anticipate that.
Do you have any other business to discuss? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So.
We're adjourned, thank you.